It's late. You're walking home alone, and the streetlights are spaced just a little too far apart. Up ahead, a woman stands beneath one of them perfectly still. She's wearing a surgical mask. Nothing unusual about that, not anymore. But as you get closer, she turns to face you, and she asks you one simple question. Am I pretty? Whatever you say next might be the last thing you ever say correctly. Welcome back. Today we're going deep into one of Japan's most infamous urban legends, a story so effective it caused actual school lockdowns in the 1970s. This is the story of Kuchisake Onna. If this is your first time here, I tell true urban legends, ghost stories, and folklore from around the world. The kind of stories that started as whispers and became something people genuinely feared walking home at night. If that sounds like your thing, consider subscribing and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. Quick note before we start, this legend blends real historical panic with folklore that's been retold and reshaped for over a century. I'll walk you through both, what people believe happened and what historians think actually happened. Stick around to the end because the rules for surviving an encounter with her are more specific and stranger than you'd expect. All right, let's begin. Every version of this legend starts the same way. A woman in her 20s or 30s wearing a plain surgical face mask. Nothing suspicious in Japan, where mask wearing has always been common for illness, allergies, or simple courtesy. She approaches someone, usually alone, usually at night, often a child walking home from school, and asks a question that sounds almost too casual. Watashi? Kairei? Am I pretty? If you say no, she kills you on the spot with a pair of large metal scissors, the same scissors she used on herself. If you say yes, she pulls down her mask. And you see it. Her mouth has been slit from ear to ear, a grin carved wide across her face. Then she asks again, "Now? Am I still pretty?" There is no right answer. Say no this time, and she kills you where you stand. Say yes, and according to the most common version of the story, she takes her scissors and cuts your mouth to match hers. You become like her, marked, grinning forever. Now, where did this actually come from? The most widely cited theory traces back roughly 1,000 years to Heian era Japan, where stories circulated about a noblewoman, sometimes said to be a concubine of a samurai lord who was disfigured by her husband as punishment for infidelity. He was said to have cut the corners of her mouth and asked her mockingly, "Who will think you're beautiful now?" Other folklorists connect her to older yokai traditions, spirits and monsters that punish vanity or that test travelers with impossible questions, much like similar figures found across Japanese folklore. But the version that actually terrified a nation didn't come from ancient texts. It came from 1978 or 1979 in Japan, when reports of Kuchisake Onna sightings exploded almost overnight. Not in ghost stories passed around campfires, in newspapers, in classrooms, in parent-teacher meetings. Children in several prefectures refused to walk home alone. Schools organized staff patrols to escort students. In some towns, police actually increased night patrols because so many people called in reported sightings. For a brief period, this wasn't treated as folklore, it was treated as a possible public safety threat. That's the part that makes this story different from most urban legends. This one had a documented mass panic behind it. Let's slow down and walk through the full legend the way it's most commonly told, because the details matter. It's evening. The sky has that dim orange-gray color right before full dark. You're walking down a quiet residential street, quiet enough that you can hear your own footsteps. Ahead of you, under a street lamp, a woman is standing. She's tall, taller than she should be, some versions say, wearing a long coat or trench coat, hair long and dark, face covered by a plain white surgical mask. She isn't doing anything. She isn't moving. She's just standing there, watching the street. You'd walk past. Most people would, but she steps toward you. "Excuse me," she says, voice muffled slightly by the mask. "Am I pretty?" Most versions agree on what happens if you ignore her or run. She is fast. Unnaturally fast, faster than her calm walking pace would suggest, and some tellings say she can appear again farther down the road before you've caught your breath. So say you answer. Say you answer. Say you answer. Say you answer. Say you tell her yes. She reaches up with one hand and pulls the mask down. Her mouth is slit open at both corners, the cuts running back almost to her ears, teeth and gums visible in a permanent wet grin. And she asks again calmly, like she's genuinely curious. Even now? Am I still pretty? This is the part of the legend that varies the most, and it's worth knowing all three common endings, because different regions of Japan tell it differently. Ending 1. The most common. If you say no, she kills you with the scissors she carries right there. If you say yes, she takes those same scissors and cuts your mouth to match hers, so you become another version of her, or, in some tellings, so you're marked for her to find again later. Ending 2. The escape. Some versions say you can survive by giving a non-answer. Saying something like, "you're average" or "so-so" confuses her long enough for you to run, because her legend was built entirely around vanity and extremes. She doesn't know what to do with an answer that isn't yes or no. Ending 3. The object trick. In several regional tellings, throwing money, hard candy, or specific traditional sweets at her feet distracts her just long enough to escape because she's compelled to stop and pick them up. And there's one more detail nearly every version agrees on. She moves faster than a normal person, and if you run, some stories say she'll actually be waiting for you again. Around the very next corner, standing perfectly calm, like she never moved at all. Now I want to walk you through one of the most repeated first-person style accounts tied to this legend, the kind of story that circulated in Japanese school playgrounds during the height of the 1979 panic, retold here in narrative form. A junior high student, we'll call her Emmy since names were rarely recorded in these tellings, was walking home later than usual after club practice ran long. Normally, she'd take the main road with the streetlights and the convenience store on the corner, the one with the bright fluorescent sign that made everything feel a little safer. But it was getting dark fast, and there was a shortcut, a narrow alley between two rice fields that cut 10 minutes off her walk. She'd never taken it at night before, but she was tired and her legs hurt, and 10 minutes felt like a lot right then. The alley was quieter than she expected. No cicadas, no wind, just her own footsteps on the gravel. That's when she saw the woman, standing at the far end of the alley. Exactly where the path opened back onto the street was a tall figure in a long coat, mask on, not moving, just waiting, facing her direction, like she'd been standing there the whole time. Emmy told herself it was nothing, just someone walking home too. She kept going, eyes down, footsteps a little faster now. "Excuse me," the voice stopped her cold. "Close, too close for how far away the woman had been a second ago. Am I pretty?" Emmy didn't answer right away. She'd heard the stories. Every kid at her school had heard some version of them by that point. But hearing a story on the playground and having the question actually asked of you, inches away, in a dark alley, are two very different experiences. She remembered something an older classmate had told her. Not yes, not no, something in between. "You're average," Emmy said. Her voice barely came out. The woman tilted her head like she genuinely hadn't considered that answer before. And then, nothing. She simply stepped aside silently and let Emmy pass. Emmy didn't run until she was 50 meters clear of the alley. When she looked back, the woman was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just an empty stretch of gravel where she'd been standing a moment before. Emmy never took that shortcut again, and according to the version of this story that circulated for years afterward, neither did anyone else at her school. This next account comes from a different flavor of the legend, one told less among school children and more among adults, specifically among taxi and truck drivers working night routes through rural prefectures during the peak of the panic. A driver, we'll call him Kenji, was working a late fare route through a stretch of road with almost nothing on either side. Rice paddies. The occasional shuttered farm stand. No other cars for kilometers at a time. Just past midnight, his headlights caught something on the shoulder of the road. A woman standing perfectly still, facing the oncoming traffic. Facing him. He slowed instinctively. "You don't leave someone stranded out here at this hour." He pulled over, rolled down the window. "You need a ride?" She didn't answer at first, just walked toward the car, slowly, evenly, and leaned down toward the open window. He noticed the mask before anything else, then the coat, then how tall she was, even bent down like that. Am I pretty? Kenji, in the version of this story most often told, had heard the rumors going the round. Every driver on that route had by then, because 2 other drivers had already reported the same encounter that same month. He knew, or thought he knew, what came next. He said yes. The mask came down. He didn't scream, according to the story. He says he just froze, staring at the wide, wet grin stretched across her face, waiting for the second question he already knew was coming. Even now? Am I still pretty? This time, he didn't answer with words at all. He reached into the glove box, grabbed a handful of hard candy he kept for passengers, and threw it out the window onto the road. She turned instantly, crouching down to gather it from the gravel, utterly focused, like nothing else in the world existed. Kenji didn't wait to see what happened next. He drove. In his telling, retold at depots and truck stops for months afterward, he checked his mirror once, just once, half a kilometer down the road. The shoulder was empty. Now here's where the story gets genuinely interesting from a historical standpoint, because the 1979 panic wasn't just folklore spreading by word of mouth. Researchers have proposed several real-world explanations for why it exploded so specifically and so suddenly. One leading theory ties it to kogai, a Japanese term related to industrial pollution, which was a major public anxiety in the late 1970s following several high-profile pollution-related illnesses in Japan. Some folklorists argue Kuchisake Onna tapped into a subconscious fear of disfigurement caused by chemical exposure, a monster born from real anxieties about what was happening to bodies and landscapes at the time. Another theory is more mundane, and in some ways more unsettling, mass hysteria driven almost entirely by media coverage. Once one regional newspaper ran a story about a slit-mouthed woman sighting, other outlets picked it up, competing for the same panic-driven readership. Sightings multiplied, not necessarily because more encounters were happening, but because more people were primed to interpret an ordinary masked stranger as her. There's also a much simpler, almost mundane possibility floated by some researchers, that a wave of actual reported incidents involving a woman harassing or frightening children in one specific town got amplified, retold, and folded into pre-existing folklore about disfigured spirits until the two merged into a single modern legend. Whichever explanation you find most convincing, one thing is documented fact. By the panic's peak, some schools in Japan genuinely altered dismissal procedures, and in a small number of areas, police increased evening patrols specifically in response to public concern. That's an extraordinary thing for a piece of folklore to accomplish. Let's consolidate everything the legend tells us, because if you ever find yourself testing this, for entertainment purposes only, obviously, here's what centuries of retellings agree on. Rule 1. Never answer with a flat yes or no. The entire legend is built around an impossible binary. Breaking that binary is, in most versions, your only real chance. Rule 2. Distraction over confrontation. Hard candy, called bekuame in some versions, thrown to the ground is one of the most consistent details across regional tellings. Money works in other versions. The common thread is an object that demands her attention more than you do. Rule 3. Don't run in a straight line, and don't assume distance means safety. Nearly every version agrees she moves unnaturally fast. Some tellings give her a top speed compared to a sprinting Olympic athlete. Straight line escape rarely works in the stories where someone tries it. Rule 4. And this one's more folklore flavor than survival tip. In a handful of regional versions, saying the word pomade 3 times causes her to vanish, tied to an entirely separate strand of the legend involving a pomade salesman who allegedly disfigured her. It's inconsistent with the main story, but it's told often enough to be worth mentioning. Of course, none of this needs to work in reality, because Kuchisake Onna isn't real. Probably. Kuchisake Onna didn't stay confined to 1979. She became one of the most adapted figures in Japanese Japanese horror media in the decades since, inspiring numerous films, including a well-known 2007 horror movie that reintroduced her to a new generation, along with appearances across manga, video games, and horror anthology television. She's also crossed borders. Versions of the legend, or stories heavily inspired by her, have been reported circulating in other parts of Asia over the years, occasionally sparking smaller, localized waves of concern, a testament to how effectively the core premise of the legend travels. What's kept her relevant, more than almost any other Japanese urban legend, is how simple the premise is. A stranger, a mask, a question with no safe answer. You don't need special effects or elaborate backstory to make that unsettling. You just need someone to ask you, straight-faced, "Am I pretty?" So, next time you're walking home and the street feels a little too quiet and someone up ahead is standing very still under a street lamp, you might want to have an answer ready that isn't yes and isn't no. That's the story of Kuchisake Onna, the slit-mouthed woman. If you enjoyed this one, let me know in the comments which urban legend you want covered next. I'm always looking for the next story worth losing sleep over. And if this is your first time here, consider subscribing because there are a lot more nights like this one ahead. Stay safe out there. And maybe, don't answer strangers who ask if they're pretty.